High school's 63-year-old secret gets accidentally revealed by Janitor. During a regular school day, a maintenance worker accidentally uncovered a lost item which turned out to be far more valuable than it looked. It all took place in one of Ohio's local schools, Hoover High School. The school had no idea that it was hiding a historical secret for 6 decades. But once the item was unearthed, the small town and school became famous all around the world, with thousands desperate to learn more about the item and how it got there. Hoover High School in Ohio had been up and running for over 60 years. But of course, here and there's some damage done to the structure. It has its quirks, but it's a workable building, custodian worker Chas Pyle shared with Fox 8 News. It turns out that right next to locker 174, the metal trimming that had shielded the gap between the lockers and the wall had fallen out. The school immediately sent over their trusted and handy custodian worker to check the wall out and begin the repairs. The school had summoned Chas, the custodian worker, to fix the damaged wall the next day. As he investigated the damages before starting up the repairs, he stumbled upon quite an interesting surprise in the wall. Squeezed in between the few-inch gap between the lockers and the wall, Chas spotted something a bit discolored and dusty on the ground. When I was walking by, I looked down and saw a lot of dust and a little bag down there in the corner, he explained to Fox 8 News. The bag wasn't just any bag, it was a little red purse that probably belonged to a student. Especially working at a high school, having lost and found service is a given. And Chas's first instinct was to take the purse to the administrative office to try to find its owner. But of course, he had all sorts of questions and thoughts racing through his mind, one of them being that it's quite odd that there would be a purse hidden behind the trimming. What was the purse doing down there? Who did the little red clutch belong to? How could it even have gotten there in the first place? With the amount of dirt and discoloration of the material, I knew it had been there for a while. Chas shared with Inside Edition about his initial investigation, and when he figured the purse had been there for a while, it seems like it meant it could have been there for years and years. Can you believe it? Once he pulled the dusty bag away from the tiny corner lodged between the lockers and the wall, he took it to the principal's office for further investigation. Little did they know, they would soon discover something they never would have imagined. There was about a 6-inch layer of dust on top of it, so we just started to go through everything that was in there, Chas shared on Fox 8 News. At first, it seemed like the purse was full of all sorts of things that you would expect to find in a teenage girl's purse. But when they started to look at the details of everything, they were blown away by what they found. We started laying it all out in the office, and we started seeing dates from like 1956 and 57, Chas further explained. One of the items inside the red clutch was a green wallet. The team of administrators opened it up and found a few interesting things hidden inside, one of which was an ID card. Finding an ID card in lost property is always such great news because that gives you a much higher chance of finding the owner, right? But even though they were lucky enough to find an ID card, it wasn't just your everyday ID that they were used to seeing. Whether it's your passport, driver's license, or your high school ID card, basically all forms of identification come with a picture, as well as some personal information, right? Well, since this identification card was from the 50s, it was without photographs. But that didn't mean it didn't provide enough information to start the hunt for the original owner. It was time to use some intricate detective skills. The fact that the school unit stated North Canton High School meant that the ID card belonged to a student who attended North Canton High School. But interestingly enough, North Canton High School was later changed to Hoover High School back in 1957, which means this ID card must have been from some time before then. The team couldn't believe that they had just found a purse that was over half a century old. This meant that the purse was basically like a time capsule of what it was like to be a teenager over 6 decades ago. Although they were incredibly anxious to find out more about the content of the purse, they were also excited about the fact that they had found some form of identification for the owner. The name written on the vintage ID card was Patricia Rumfola, which meant that they had a good lead to tracking her down. It was time to track down their veteran alumni students, and so the school turned to the internet and social media for their search. But even without searching, they were able to learn so many cool things about the owner of this long-lost purse. First of all, if Patricia Rumfola had documents and pictures dated back to 1956 and 1957, then she was likely one of the first freshmen in the new Hoover High School building, previously known as North Canton High School. How exciting! Amazingly enough, the school was finally able to find the owner. Upon their discovery, they were presented with some good news and some sad news. It turned out that Patricia Rumfola, more commonly known as Patty, was, in fact, the owner of the long-lost purse. Even though she wasn't living in the Midwest for most of her adult life, they found out that she was born and raised in Ohio. And on top of that, the school's suspicions were true. She graduated from Hoover High School in 1960, meaning she truly was one of the first graduating classes from the new school. As exciting as it was to have found the long-lost owner of the purse, there was still some sad news attached to it. They were sad to discover that dear Patty had passed away at age 71, a few years before this incredible finding in 2013. However, that wasn't the end of this mind-blowing historical discovery. The school was able to get in touch with Patty's next of kin and were surprised to learn so much about their former student. The Hoover High alumni got married in 1980 and had 5 children with the love of her life, John G. Mitchell. Her husband had passed away in 2007, but the school was able to reach out to the rest of the family about the purse. And as surprising as it was also incredibly enlightening and heartwarming. Needless to say, they were filled with so many emotions. But it was when they would see the items in the purse themselves that the real excitement would start. Can you imagine what her kids must have felt like, knowing that there was a piece of their mother's history left behind for them? During an interview with Inside Edition, one of Patty's daughters shared, "I was crying and smiling and excited about it. I just think it's cool. It's like a show and tell for Mom, and she's not even here." Before settling down to have a family, Patty accomplished and achieved so many inspiring things. After graduating from Hoover High School, Patty decided to keep herself involved with the education system and became a teacher herself. After a full career as an educator, she retired from a local school in Annapolis, Maryland. Patty seemed to be one ambitious and inspiring woman. According to her obituary, she was one of the founding members of the Theater Arts Guild and Young Women's Club, both in Punxsutawney. She continued, she was active as a costume designer and seamstress with the Reitz Theater, but her ambition seemed to be a part of her even when she was a young adolescent, and her family was just about to find out from this mysterious red clutch purse. According to some of the documents in Patty's wallet and purse, she was a busy little bee, and an artistically driven one too. In the purse, there was a cutout of Mr. Weatherby comic strip, a famous cartoon from the 40s and 50s, along with a sketch of him. Not just that, but during her time in high school, she joined the a cappella choir and annual staff. And she had the papers to prove it. Folded up in her bag were papers of song lists with the music lineup for a show, all typed on a typewriter. Another unique antique item that was found in Patty's purse was a Hoover High School Vikings football game schedule from back when it was North Canton High in 1956. This sort of untouched view into the 50s high school life has never been seen before. And not just that. The list of games had certain home and away games crossed off on it, giving it an extra personal Patty touch. And it seemed like her love of sports continued to the next year, as she also had a baseball game scheduled for the 1957 season. Looks like the trend of keeping ticket stubs has been going on for decades. Not only did the school find sports game schedules in her purse, but there were also ticket stubs to North Canton High School's games. Nowadays, a local high school sports game ticket probably costs around $10 to $15, but it looks like back in the day, each ticket ranged from 30 to 50 cents. That means the tickets cost about 20 times more than they did over 6 decades ago. At that rate, tickets for local school games will cost $200 by 2080. How wild! Patty had a whole lot of school spirit and enjoyed being involved, so much so that it seemed she even carried around some school supplies in her purse. Even though all of the items zipped away in the purse were hidden away from any entry of the dust or light for years, it's still incredible to see they were kept in such great condition. But some of the more timeless tools that were found were 3 pencils, 2 types of erasers, a pen, and even a ruler. But you wouldn't believe this next set of items that were found in great condition. The cool thing about the myriad of other vintage items found in the purse and wallet from that time is that some of them were school-related, while others were incredibly personal to the young adolescent Patty. One of the most meaningful items found inside the purse and wallet, though, were black and white pictures documenting blasts from the past. A bunch of photos of what seemed to be family members, friends, and even a cute little dog was kept in keen condition, including one dating back to 1950. It's always so touching and nice to know how much people care about your parents, especially when they have passed away. That's why one of the pictures that stood out was a special photo from what seems to be one of Patty's dear pals, Bonnie. The handwritten inscription is incredibly heartwarming, touching, and we're sure super sweet for Patty's children to read. The front reads, "Patty, good luck to a swell girl and friend, Bonnie," while the back states, "Never forget the wonderful times we had. I hope we can be friends always, even though we're far apart. Bonnie, 56. It's amazing how something can seem like such an everyday thing at the time, but can turn out to be a time capsule of that generation years later. For example, another vintage item found in Patty's purse was different membership cards. Nowadays, everything is printed, but back then, all sorts of cards were a combination of print and handwritten, just like Patty's local public library card and her YMCA member card. What a tale of time, right? But there were still a couple of incredibly rare artifacts that were found in the clutch. What's the one thing that every girl has in her purse? Especially teenage girls. Makeup and hygiene products, of course, along with a comb to style that hair. Patty had a couple of precious makeup products in her little red clutch, lipstick and a compact powder. But these weren't just any types of makeup products. Every girl knows that the choice of your makeup color scheme says a lot about you. For instance, are you more down to earth and enjoy those skin tones and coy colors? Or are you the ambitious and bold type who wears the vivid colors that you can spot from a mile? What was Patty's choice? First of all, Patty had not one, but two different lipsticks in her purse. And it turns out that the young teenage girl had a vibrant, fun, and bold taste in colors. One tube was pastel pink, from the famous Hazel Bishop Ink Cosmetics brand that shined in the 50s, while the other looked like a luscious, bold red. How fun! But in all honesty, it's her compact powder case that truly takes the cake when it comes to all of the cool vintage products in her purse. Along with the two tubes of lipstick was a very special compact case. It was the 50s styled Evening in Paris brand product that was known to have a special perfume-like scent to it. When her daughters were going through her items in the purse, they opened up the compact and got a nice, fresh whiff of it. It still has this perfumey smell to it, one of Patty's daughters excitingly shared with Inside Edition. However, what makes this so special is the fact that the fragrance Evening in Paris by Bourjois was discontinued in 1969. What a unique item! There was another super interesting and rare item that was found in Patty's purse. Unsurprisingly, it's an item that most women and men carry around with them. Among all of the school supplies, documents, pictures, and makeup was a stick of chewing gum. That's right, in Patty's precious red clutch was a 63-year-old stick of peppermint-flavored beech nut chewing gum from the 50s. We know the slogan says, "always refreshing," but we're surprised that it held this long and didn't melt, in all honesty. On Inside Edition, one of Patty's sons emotionally expressed his experience looking through the purse for the first time, describing it as a snapshot into a moment, but seeing the purse and all of its 63-year-old contents was just a part of the experience. After seeing everything, they decided to keep a special souvenir. But before we reveal who took what, there was still one last item that we're sure you've been wondering whether or not was found in the purse. There's one last historical thing that was found in Patty's purse, and it was probably one of the most historic artifacts of them all. Within this prized time capsule from the 50s were 9 different coins, all totaling up to 27 cents, which is about $2.42 in today's rate. And even though that doesn't seem like a lot of money, from what we've learned before, that's basically like 1 or 2 stadium game tickets depending on the game. How cool! But it turns out that these pennies would hold more value than anyone would have expected. Upon further inspection, they found out that the pennies were actually wheat pennies, a coin that circulated from 1909 to 1958 and held a high historical significance. However, it turns out that they now held a high personal value for the family too. Each of her 5 children kept one of the wheat pennies as a token of remembrance of their mom, North Canton City Schools wrote on their Facebook post how precious and heartwarming. Even though Patty isn't able to see this for herself, there's no doubt that her children were beyond thrilled seeing all of these antique items in her purse and receiving this gold mine of mementos of their mother. One of Patty's daughters explained to Inside Edition that her mother would be so excited to know that the school has found and returned the purse over 6 decades later. And who wouldn't be excited? This was such a nostalgic throwback and incredibly rare time capsule to the high school times of the 1950s. About a year later, in the spring semester of 2020, the North Canton City Schools posted an official announcement on their Facebook, sharing the story with the community. Patty's 5 children were together for a family gathering in the fall, where they opened the purse to have a glimpse into their mother's life as a teenager at Hoover High School. Those of you who may have gone to school in the 1950s or 60s may have memories of some of these items, the school district wrote in their post. Along with the post, the school district attached over 30 photos of the items found in Patty's 1957 purse. As much as people loved looking through the post and reflecting on the fun little knickknacks from the past, it was clear that the vintage contents weren't the only thing turned out to be memorable. The whole story itself proved to be meaningful to the community in its special way, and the story went viral instantly. Within a few months, the post by the local Midwestern school district has reached 50,000 likes and over 60,000 shares. How did the purse end up lodged between the lockers and the wall in the first place? There hasn't been any definite explanation, but the best guess is that the locker design was probably different than what it is today. The most logical explanation is that the metal trimming that fills the gap between the lockers and the wall and the top of the lockers just didn't exist at the time, and because of that, the purse was able to accidentally fall into the gap but wasn't accessible to retrieve. Even though we're sure it was devastating for Patty at the time to have lost her purse back when she was a young, blossoming adolescent in her freshman year, we think it's safe to say the purse turned out to hold a lot more value now than she would have ever expected. And with that said, Chaz further shared and reassured to Inside Edition,